Hello, everyone, and to all my reading friends. Today, I want to talk about a book that honestly changed the way I approach reading, The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. Now, I have to confess, this was my first real dive into a horror fantasy adventure, and at the beginning, it felt both exciting and a little intimidating. King's writing style can feel dense at first. The sentences are long, the vocabulary can be challenging, and the story shifts between the real world and this strange parallel universe called the Territories. But once you settle into it, once you find your rhythm, you start to see how intentional everything is. Every detail builds atmosphere, develops character, or hints at something deeper. It stops feeling like just a story and starts feeling like an experience. And what really pulled me in was how horror and fantasy blended together. One moment you feel grounded in reality, then suddenly something unsettling appears and you realize you're no longer in familiar territory. One of the strongest parts of this book is definitely the characters. We follow Jack Sawyer, a 12-year-old boy who's given a nearly impossible mission to save his mother by traveling across both worlds. And what makes Jack so compelling is that he doesn't feel like a perfect hero. He doubts himself, he makes mistakes, he gets scared, but he keeps going anyway. That growth, that emotional journey is what makes his story feel real. Even the side characters stand out. If you've read other books by Stephen King, you probably know how memorable his characters can be, like Annie Wilkes from Misery or Father Callahan from Salem's Lot. They don't just exist for the plot, they feel like real people with fears, quirks, and motivations. And in The Talisman, that same depth is everywhere. Allies, villains, even brief encounters, they all leave an impression. Now let's talk about the adventure itself, because this story is huge. Jack travels across America and through the territories, facing monsters, solving problems, and meeting characters that aren't always clearly good or bad. At its core, it feels like a classic quest story. Danger, discovery, survival. But what makes it unique is the constant unpredictability. Just when you think you understand the rules of the world, something unexpected happens. The dual worlds, the real world and the territories, create this constant tension. Some places feel familiar and safe, and then suddenly they're not. There's also a rhythm to the storytelling that I really appreciated. You get intense, action-packed moments, followed by quieter scenes that let you breathe and reflect. That balance makes the journey immersive without feeling overwhelming. But beyond adventure, there's also a lot of symbolism hidden throughout the story. The talisman itself feels like more than just an object. It represents hope, resilience, and the idea of pushing forward even when things feel impossible. The territories, in a way, feel symbolic too. They mirror inner struggles, fears, and choices. Many of the obstacles Jack faces don't just feel physical, they feel emotional and moral as well. This is the kind of book that rewards slow reading. The more attention you give it, the more meaning you discover. Personally, reading The Talisman felt transformative for me. Before this, I hadn't really explored horror fantasy in depth. I stayed mostly within genres I was comfortable with. But this book reminded me that stepping outside your usual reading zone can be incredibly rewarding. At first, I struggled a bit with the pacing and the style, but once I adjusted, I became completely invested in Jack's journey. I wanted to know what would happen next. I wanted to understand the world more deeply. And that feeling, that curiosity, that's what makes this reading experience unforgettable. So here's my takeaway for you, my literary friends. If you enjoy stories with complex plots, memorable characters, The Talisman is definitely worth exploring. It might challenge you at first, but the challenge is part of what makes it rewarding. And honestly, this book reminded me of something important. Don't be afraid to try genres that feel unfamiliar. Some of the best stories are the ones that push you out of your comfort zone. Before I end, I'd love to hear from you. Have you read The Talisman? What part stood out to you the most? And if you haven't read it, would you consider picking it up? As always, keep exploring, keep reading, and keep turning pages. See you again next time on our next review here on Petals and Pages by Angelo.